Keep your finger here and go with me to the Gospel of John. Keep your finger there and go to John chapter 12. This was our scripture reading. John chapter 12. John chapter 12, and notice with me verse 31. John chapter 12 and verse 31. It says, now. Hey, there's our word. Now. John 12:31. Now is the judgment of this world. Now the ruler of this world will be what? Hey, there's our word. Cast. So, according to Jesus, when is this taking place? Now. Does everyone see that? Now is the judgment of this world. Now the ruler of this world will be cast out. And then he tells you in verse 32, and if I be lifted up from the earth, I will what? Draw all men to me. In other words, beloved, in the context of the cross, Satan was cast out. When Jesus says, and if I be lifted up from the earth, I will draw all men to me, he is referring to the cross event. That's a reference to the cross. And so he says in verse 31, Satan is now cast out. The principles by which this world has been operating for more than 4,000 years are now judged, and I will be lifted up from the earth, and all people, all men, will be drawn to me. In the context of the cross, Satan was cast out. He actually says it 2 other times. Stay in John and look at John chapter 14, verse 30. John chapter 14, and notice verse 30. He says, I will no longer talk much with you, for the ruler of this world is coming, and he has nothing in me. The ruler of this world, Jesus calls him here again. The prince of this world is coming, but he has nothing in me. Notice also John chapter 16 and verse 11. He says, of judgment, speaking of the Spirit of God convicting of judgment because the ruler of this world is what? Judged. Now, I want you to think about this. Go back to Revelation chapter 12. Remember I told you to keep your finger there? Here's what's happening, beloved. For 30 years-ish, Jesus was on earth, walking and talking and teaching and healing and living. And Satan was always trying to get him, trying to deceive him, trying to cause him to sin, trying to tempt him. And at the end of those 30 years, Jesus willingly turned himself over to the authorities. The angels were looking with tremendous curiosity. As we already learned, the angels rejoiced when they were told that a way of escape had been made for man. But when they were told how man would be ransomed, they could not rejoice. Remember that, everyone? Okay, so now the angels have been watching, as it were, with their breath held for 30 years. Here comes Jesus, and then he makes it out of that circumstance. He makes it out of that one. And then they notice that Jesus willfully turns himself over. He's been ministering for 3.5 years. They heard his prayer in John 17, I have finished the work which you have given me to do. And then they see the way that the religious leaders and eventually the Romans begin to treat Jesus. And they can't believe what they're seeing. You know that the angels were just ready at any moment, just waiting for the slightest command from the Father to go down and rescue Jesus, because when Peter chopped off Malchus's ear, Jesus turned to Peter and said, don't you think that I could ask my Father and right now he would send legions of angels? So you know the angels were just waiting at any moment for God to give the command, get him out of there. It's too much. I can't bear it. Go get him. So the angels are watching, and they notice how Jesus is brought to this mockery of a trial, and men with agendas and dishonest motives and unclean hands condemn Jesus in a mockery of a trial. Then, because the Jews did not have the right to exact any capital or terminal punishments, the Jews bring him to the Romans and they say, hey, kill this guy for us. Well, you know, Pilate goes back and forth, and then he's put into the hands of the people. Crucify him, we have no king but Caesar. And then his beard is torn out, and the angels can't believe what they're seeing. This is their own beloved. This is the chiefest among 10,000. This is their general. This is their commander-in-chief. He's being spat upon. He's being mocked. And then they see him led, carrying his heavy crossbeam. It's called a patibellum. He's carrying that patibellum up the hill there to Calvary, because they didn't carry the whole cross. They just carried the crossbeam, and because the other much larger beam was left at the top of the hill. He's carrying his patibellum. He brings it up to the top of the hill, and the angels are thinking, no. I mean, he's not really going to do it. And they see Jesus laid out there, and they see the nails come out and the hammer, and they just can't believe what they're seeing. And they see Jesus lifted up between heaven and earth. And the angels are thinking, no, he's not really going to do it. And then they watch Jesus expire. They watch him die. And beloved, in that moment, in that very instant, any residual sympathies that the loyal angels had for Satan, and they did, you can be sure that they themselves, even the loyal angels, always wondered. If Satan was able to persuade 1/3 of the loyal angels to follow, you know that he was extremely persuasive, extremely cunning, extremely sly. And all of the other angels, though they were loyal to God, they would have had their own questions. They would have had their own curiosities about why God allowed certain things. But when they saw Satan kill Christ, they said, no. We don't want anything to do with that. We don't want anything to do with that.